Scripture reading today will be in Proverbs 16:2. In your pew Bible, you can find that on page 539. And then we will move forward to Matthew 7, verses 1 through 5, and verse 12. And you can find that on page 812 in your pew Bible. So Proverbs 16:2. All the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit. And then to Matthew 7, verses 1 through 5, and verse 12. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite! First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Verse 12. So whatever you wish that others will do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Brad. I want to also encourage you, as Pastor Chip did, in terms of Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday. We're coming up into a season in our in church life, but also in our culture. People who might be mildly religious have an interest in church, and this is a great opportunity to invite somebody who has maybe not returned from COVID, or just looking for a church home. I was so encouraged by Mission Sunday. Like, in one sense, every single Sunday is Mission Sunday, right? Because one of the things we learned last week was that every disciple is a missionary. It's just shocking that in Mark chapter 5, Jesus doesn't let the Gadarene demoniac come with him. It's like, go and tell other people about the mercy that you have experienced in Jesus. This is not for professional Christians to do. This is every disciple a missionary. I love that. I hope we hang on to that as a church. And so be a disciple-making disciple this Easter. It could be as simple as inviting a friend or beginning to pray and then inviting someone. So, we will take a break from Proverbs next Sunday and the following to start thinking about the Passion Week and about who Jesus is and Resurrection Sunday. But today we're in another topic on Proverbs. If you're joining us for the first time, today we're thinking about relationships and the art and craft. Because wisdom is an art and a craft. There are things about wisdom that fall into both of those categories. And so we want to think today about the art and craft of relationship. To do that, let me ask you to think about your most important relationships like a house. Like a house. Like, if your house is like our house, something is almost always breaking, right? A leak. I mean, even if you're building a brand new house, even if you're Rob and Trish Eanes and you're your own general contractor and you're building your own house, you're going to move in and something's not going to be right. It's just impossible. That's the way relationships are. Human relationships are in constant need. Do you find this to be true? Human relationships are in constant need of minor repairs and sometimes of major renovations. Because relationships, that's where we live. Relationships are where we live. And your the happiness of your life rises and falls really on the happiness of those relationships. Proverbs is loaded with wisdom on human relations. You could spend the rest of your life in Proverbs learning and practicing social skills for human relationships and still not get there. So we want to take a stab at it today. Here are several of my favorite Proverbs. I hope this will help you long term, and I'm thinking about ways that you can practice healthy relationships for the rest of your life. I'm going to give you some Proverbs and try to get these favorites on the table. Number 1, speak life, not death. We talked about this a few Sundays back. Proverbs 18:21 says that the power of life and death is in the tongue, and those who love its fruits, they will feel the effect of that. Those who love it, rather, will feel the effect of speaking either life or death. And we spent really a whole message on that. I'm just going to refer you back to that. If you have not heard that, you can check it out on the podcast. You have an incredibly powerful resource in your words. Your words can shame and hurt, or your words can bring truth and healing and life and restoration. So we talked a lot about that, but I didn't want to just pass it over because relationships really do rise and fall on the way we speak to one another and how we use our words. All right, so commercial for the last sermon on this. Point number 2. Let's dig into this. Go to 16:2, and maybe you're still there. Flip back to 16:2. Here's something that is a surprising foundational social skill. In fact, it's uniquely Christian. Suspect yourself first. The gospel of Jesus enables us, even requires us, to be wisely suspicious of our own motives before we suspect other people. So 16:2 says this: all the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes. In your state, in our fully human, fallen state, we think what we do is right. We just think that. If we didn't, we would do it differently. All of our ways are right in our own eyes. This proverb is teaching me that human self-perception cannot be trusted. Only Yahweh truly knows the heart of man. That's what 16:2 is about. Only God truly knows the heart of man. Take it a step further. Only God can accurately measure motives. You and I can't even accurately measure our own motives. It's a sign of wisdom and maturity and keen self-awareness to admit that you can't perfectly measure your own motives, and that your motives are often mingled with self-righteousness and pride. So one of the most life-changing things you could ever do to improve human relations with your spouse, with your friends, with your coworkers, is to start suspecting yourself first before you suspect them. This is complete reversal of the order of things that we naturally feel. Look at the expression here in verse 2, in his own eyes. Have you seen that before? This is a rich biblical expression that describes how we so often think we know. Be not, another proverb says, be not wise, what? In your own eyes, right? So what's happening here is the writer of Proverbs is teaching us, and it's so life-changing. It will change how you handle conflict at work, the tone with which you speak at a church business meeting, the way you treat your spouse at home when no one else is there. This is total game changer. If you will start suspecting yourself before you suspect the other person, it's just like gold. This is relational gold. Like 16:2 is relational gold. The Lord, He weighs the Spirit. He knows. Here's the next one. Number 3, cover an offense. 17:9. Look at Proverbs 17:9. Just one page over. Learn in your relationship building. Learn in your home improvement, your sustaining of relationships, to cover an offense. This is so incredibly practical, and you can do it like over and over again. This week, you're going to have a chance to do this. Get in the gospel habit of covering the offense of another person. Listen to Proverbs 17:9. Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates. Even close friends can be separated when you bring it up again. And you can't just say to yourself, well, I won't bring it up again, because there's no gospel in that. You have to cover the offense. You have to activate the gospel. When you get snubbed in the hallway at school or at church, or a family member does that thing that just drives you crazy, you have to decide, what do you do? The bumper sticker that says or the t-shirt that says don't sweat the small stuff. Okay, I've been trying that. But there's no gospel in don't sweat the small stuff either. You've got to cover the offense. You've got to activate the gospel. Here's the idea. If the great high priest Jesus, listen to this. If you're a believer, if you're a Christian, listen to this. If the great high priest, Jesus Christ, has sprinkled his blood on the mercy seat to cover every single sin and offense you have perpetrated against a holy, perfectly righteous God, you now have a well to tap to give grace to cover the offense of another person. Otherwise, you can't. Otherwise, you can just try all the world's options, right? But they don't work. My all-time favorite biblical illustration of this, on what it means to cover the sin of another person, is in Genesis 9. You don't have to turn there, but let me tell you this story. Genesis 9, Noah has become a farmer. He planted a vineyard, and they learned how to make wine, and things get out of control with his wine, and he gets drunk, and he shames himself. Noah is a drunken mess, and his son Ham finds out about it, and he takes pleasure in exposing his father's shame. Shem and Japheth, on the other hand, when he comes to them, and we don't know all the details. We don't know all the details about the mess that Noah got himself into. Surely there's more happening than the Genesis 9 text tells us. But we don't know all the details. But we do know this with certainty, because the author of Genesis crafts the narrative for this express purpose, to say that Ham did not handle it well. He took pleasure in pointing out his dad's sin. Shem and Japheth, on the other hand, it is a beautiful image of the gospel. Listen to this. They won't even look openly on their dad's shame. They take a large garment and put it on one shoulder and the other, and they back in to their father's tent and cover his nakedness, his shame. You, as a believer in Jesus, have an opportunity to cover the shame of other people, like week in and week out, when you activate the gospel in your own heart. You're going to have a chance to point out somebody's sin this week. I promise. Like, it's going to happen. I mean, several of you, you know what I'm saying. It's coming. You're going to have a chance to take a delight or pleasure in pointing out someone's sin. You're going to have to choose Ham or Japheth. Activate the gospel in your heart. Cover the sin of someone else. When you do this and you don't make an announcement about it, there becomes a sweet, secret beauty of grace in your heart. And it will improve your relationships. It has to. It's beautiful. Number 4. If you want to have better relationships, don't be quarrelsome. Some of you might be asking, how did you pick these out? Like, you're going to give us several of these. How'd you pick them out? Well, I'm trying to address both the frequency with which Proverbs speaks of these things and the ones I like. So, okay, the ones I need help with. I hope you need some help here too. 26, 20, and 21. Look at this. Proverbs 26, verses 20 and 21. Another way to really bring health to your relationships. Don't be quarrelsome. Where there's a lack of wood, the fire goes out. And where there's no whisperer, quarreling ceases. As charcoal to hot embers and wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome person for kindling strife. I don't know if this has been a thing for you as a parent or not, but did you ever walk into your kids, into a moment in your house, and there was just bickering going on? Like, just bickering and bickering and bickering. Just stop. Just stop talking. Because if you take the log off the fire, the wood off the fire, it'll go out. Don't love an argument. Don't love an argument. Don't love to quarrel. The Bible has so much to say about this. Some people are argumentative because they have a hard time distinguishing between essential gospel truths and unessential issues. Others are argumentative because pride fuels the quarrelsome fire. Still others simply lack self-control. So once the debate starts, we get pulled in and we just love a good fight, right? So people are all over the place on this, but there are real reasons for why quarrelsome stuff continues. And the best way to do this, the best way to address this, is to figure out how you personally can help let the fire go out. It might look different for you. You don't have to win. You don't have to have the last word. You don't have to be in control. Let me say it like this. In your relationships, guess what a quarrelsome spirit does? Having the last word, having to fuel the... In relationships, a quarrelsome spirit distances you from people. Now, some people might, for a time, enjoy that, but nobody likes that over time. Nobody can really live with loneliness. A quarrelsome spirit distances you from people. A freedom to not have the last word draws people closer to you. Like, you know what? I can talk to that person because I feel like he's really listening. She is really listening. It'll deepen your respect for one another when you take this one seriously. You're saying to the person, you matter enough to me that I'm not going to I'm not going to bicker with you about these finer points. Here's number 5. Be careful with humor. Laughter is a gift from the Lord, right? Laughter is a gift from God. It's a beautiful thing. We should learn to take ourselves less seriously. We should learn to laugh at ourselves more than we laugh at other people. Like, it's again, this is the gospel reversal, right? We should learn how to laugh at ourselves more than we laugh at others. It's a gift. It's a beautiful thing. Humor is a gift. But you also have to be really careful with humor, don't you think? You got to be careful. Look at 26:8, just right above it, 18 and 19. Look at how important it is to be careful with the way that you use humor. Like a madman who throws firebrand arrows, like who firebrands and arrows and death, like a maniac who's trying to kill people in a war with arrows and is the person who deceives his neighbor with a joke. I was just kidding. Hey, when I said to you, keep your stupid dog off my lawn, I was just kidding. Are you with me? Like, this happens. The person who says, I was only joking, like that, creates so much distance in a relationship. Be careful with humor. It's so easy to cross the line. And in fact, you and I do different versions of this when we say, hey, I really didn't mean that. We say this to our spouses, we say this to our friends, I really didn't mean that. When really, what should you say? You know what? I did mean that. I shouldn't have said it. Will you forgive me for saying that? I don't like what's in here. That when I really say what I mean, I don't like that. Will you please forgive me for that? Be careful when you say, I was only joking. One of the fastest ways you can cripple a relationship is with sarcasm, or making fun of someone else, or dropping a critical comment and then laughing it off. Be careful. And the reason people do that, by the way, this is me just kind of riffing. The reason I think people do that, make a comment and then laugh it off, is they don't really know how to talk about things of substance. They've never been taught how to have a genuine conversation in which you could bless and not curse, and yet also talk about something that mattered. Like, the reason people curse the way that they do, they drop the F-bomb every other word. I mean, the reason all of the interviews have bleep, 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 is people just, it's not because they have just such a juvenile vocabulary. That's true. But that's not all. It's that their whole life has become trivialized. They really don't know what to say. So they just cuss up a storm. It's just a really bad, foolish habit. But it doesn't mean they're more sinful than you. Right? Be careful with humor, and especially avoid vulgarity. Number 6. Pastor Chip just looked up and he said, kind of say it like this: mind your business. Like, mind your own beeswax. You should. You will save everyone in your relational network a ton of drama and time and energy if you will start minding your own business more. That's what Proverbs says. 26:17. Look at this. Whoever meddles in a quarrel, just backing up to the verse, are you with me? 26:17, same basic place. Whoever meddles in a quarrel not his own is like one who takes a stray dog by the ears. Now, if you've got the guts to walk up to a stray dog in a place you've never been and grab him by the ears and just, give him a hard time, have a blast. He might light you up with a little bite. Mind your own business is such a great, it's just such great, this is why we love Proverbs, because it's just so straightforward. It's so good. Like, whoever meddles, here's what it says, verse 17, whoever meddles. To meddle means to insert yourself into a relational context where you have not been invited. But you think you're supposed to go there. You think you sort of become the self-appointed advocate for everybody's relationships. That is a recipe for disaster. Passing a dog that you don't know and doesn't know you. I love Tim Keller's. I don't think I've held this up yet. If I have, I'll hit you again with it. Tim Keller's book on Proverbs is super helpful. It's called God's Wisdom for Navigating Life. Here's what he says about this particular verse. Don't be a busybody. When two people are having a conflict with each other, it can wreak havoc on all those around him because there's such a strong temptation to take sides. It's hard not to sympathize with the one you know best, not to share his or her hurt in a way that doesn't vilify the other party. It just happens. As a result, he says, we have second and third order unreconciled relationships. The enemy of your friend and the friends of your friend's enemy all become your enemies. The enemy of your friend and the friends of your friend's enemy all become your enemies. It's a mess, but it happens all the time. Make a spiritually mature decision upstream to ask yourself this question: is this my business? Is this mine to step into? Have I been invited into this? And then number 7, last one. Make charitable, not uncharitable judgments. Look at 18:3. Go back to Proverbs 18, verse 3. I'm sorry, 13. 18:13. 18 and 13. If you answer before you hear, it's to your folly and shame. If one gives an answer before he hears, that is, if one is quick to give an answer, quick to speak, rather than being quick to listen, quick to hear, it'll end up being embarrassing. It'll end up being shameful to you. It'll end up being an unhealthy situation. Why are we so quick to judge the motives of other people? Why? We have to ask ourselves this. Why is the impulse so quick to judge the motive of another person, to think the worst of their words and their actions? This week, we, in the church-wide email, and if you're not on the Thursday email and you're interested in getting in the cycle of that, please let us know. Call the office. We'll get you on it. But this week, in our Thursday email, we sent out an article by Ken Sande on charitable judgments. Did some of you see that? Just a head nod if you got that. Okay. So it's a great summary of the biblical teaching on the importance of making a charitable judgment. If you haven't looked at that, go back, and it's a great homework assignment. There's a story in there that he tells. It's kind of humorous. And so it goes like this. There's a guest preacher at a small church one day, and he rolls in early because he's got to get his thoughts together, and he's in the parking lot working on his sermon. And as he's working on his sermon, he takes his pencil and he puts it in his mouth and flipping the Bible page, flipping the pages like this. And then he takes it and he puts it back down, starts writing. Well, just about the time that happens, a deacon drove by. And the deacon drove by, saw that whole scene, and went into the church. And got with some of the other deacons. Said, the guy who's supposed to preach today is out in the parking lot smoking a cigarette. And so they got kind of worked up about it. When the pastor came, the pastor du jour, when he came in, he sensed this antagonism and distance. And he said, is everything okay? And as Sandy tells the story, he says, this is what the head deacon said to him. We find it, they just dropped right into it. No questions, no asking questions, no help us understand something. He said, we just find it very offensive that you would sit in our church parking lot smoking a cigarette when you're about to preach the Bible from our pulpit. He said, what are you talking about? I don't smoke. What did you have in your mouth? Oh, I guess maybe I had this in my mouth when I was turning the page. I mean, how utterly embarrassing to raise an accusation against someone who's coming to minister the gospel because of an uncharitable assumption. It's a great story because we do this all the time with people. You hear some tasty gossip. You see a fragment from a scene in someone's life, and instead of assuming the best, you assume the worst. And to complicate the matter, your assumptions come with a blindness that favors your views. It's inevitable. Turn to Matthew chapter 7, and we'll close with this. If you could turn there, Matthew chapter 7. Jesus calls his disciples into an experience of grace. And his disciples make grace-filled, love-motivated judgments. Listen again to this famous passage in Matthew 7, 1 through 5. Judge not, that you not be judged. Now, Jesus is way more careful. That's not the end. Jesus is way more careful than don't judge, period, right? He says, for the judgment you pronounced, like that, with that same judgment that you work, it will be used on you. It'll be, with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Why do you see the speck so easily in your brother's eye? Like, why do you see it so clearly? But you don't notice a log is hanging, a massive timber is hanging out of your eye, and like when you turn, you knock people over with it. You don't see that. But why is it? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your own eye when there's a log in yours? You hypocrite. Look at verse 5. You hypocrite. Take the log out of your own eye. When you see clearly, then you can help your brother with the speck. Drop down to verse 12. So whatever you want other people to do for you, do it to them. For this is the law and the prophets. And contrary to popular opinion, Jesus is not saying you can save yourself and you can live by the golden rule and save yourself. That's not what he's saying. In fact, the whole point of the Sermon on the Mount is to bring religious people to the end of their self-righteousness, to the point of realizing they could never keep the law. Jesus doesn't come to abolish the law. He's the fulfillment and the embodiment of the law. So the way you obey the law in the Sermon on the Mount, students have been learning this on Wednesday nights, is you get in Christ, and Jesus changes everything. And your obedience to his way of life is radically satisfying. You begin to hunger and thirst for righteousness, and you're satisfied. Jesus does for us what the law could never do. In other words, Jesus, please hear the gospel this morning. Jesus did not come to patch up your religious life. Jesus doesn't come to put a patch over your religious life. He doesn't come to give you a moral upgrade. If you think back to the house analogy and relationships, we're talking about he takes it back to the studs, down to the foundation. It's a radically new, completely new way of life in Jesus. He renovates us fully and thoroughly. And the only way you'll ever be able to make a charitable judgment of another person is if you experience the love and charity and mercy of Jesus. And when you experience his charity and mercy toward you, it lets you say, I'm not going to be the judge. I'm going to let Jesus be the judge. This doesn't mean, of course, that we don't discern, that we don't interpret, that we don't judge. It means that we do it completely differently than we've ever done it before in Christ.